Hello, and welcome to Fulfillment Therapy. My name is Maddie, Kendra Nielsen's COO, and today we'll be listening to episode 202, Honest Self-Reflection, the Key to a Thriving Marriage with Kensi Evans. We hope you enjoy.
Welcome back to Fulfillment Therapy. Today we have our guest, Kensi Evans, back. So excited to have her on the show again today. And she is going to be talking about honest self-reflection in marriage, something that we all need a little more help with. So thanks for coming back on the show. I know you have introduced yourself recently, but just a little recap for guests. I met Kensi when I went and lived in Costa Rica for a month with my family, and she's just a delightful soul with a mental health background, and she has such wonderful perspectives. I feel like every month or so we have this conversation again, and you're just so gracious, Kensi, to be like, yeah, of course, I'd love to come and talk on the show. So thank you for always being willing.
Well, thank you for having me. As you know, I am just so grateful for the opportunity because for me, it's such a privilege. I was telling you before we started how talking through the things that I'm learning and that I'm striving to implement in my life helped me to gain some more clarity and solidarity and like, okay, that makes sense. Or get feedback and be like, yeah, that could probably work on that a little bit more. But to tell a little bit about myself, I am married to my husband, Brett, for the last 13 years. We have 4 amazing boys, and we are living in Costa Rica. And my husband apparently loves me enough to follow me here because it was my idea. So we have been navigating that. So that's fun. Always an adventure. So that's where we are at right now.
I'm so jealous. My husband and I were just talking about that because he loves spearfishing, loves it. We just love play and adventure. And we just keep saying, you know, what if we just do it and just forget about what the kids want? We want to live in Costa Rica and all of the beautiful places. But yeah, we keep kind of going back and forth when you talk about it. I'm like, I just want to be back there. We spend like all of our time in the water. It was so beautiful. And I'm sure you probably don't as a local, but man, it was
Beautiful. And it's definitely not like vacation. It is more normal life. Motivation was to get to know these different people, their culture and their lives. And they're just such beautiful people down here. So no matter what, I am just grateful for the experience. Yes, the beautiful natural scenery of Costa Rica, but then also the beautiful people too. So,
oh, yeah. Well, tell me a little bit. You mentioned that you're married to Brett, and how long have you been married?
so we've been married for 13 years, going on 14 this
Okay.
year, or yeah, this year, next month, it will be 14 years. And we went to school together, high school for our junior and senior year together. So we knew each other. We were more like friend acquaintances than anything. So we didn't like date or anything like that. But then when he got back from his mission in September, I want to say, we started hanging out in October. And then it was like classic Mormon dating style from there. We dated for like a month, 2 months, and then got engaged. And then we got married 2 months later. So it was like a total of 4 months, which is super fast.
Anybody else not part of this culture is probably like, are you insane? And
Insane.
we just
Maybe a little
don't
bit.
do that too.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm glad it worked out, but
Yes.
yes, I
I
would
would.
probably have a heart attack if my daughter did that.
And there are things that we've had to navigate. And I think that it's okay and actually helpful, I think, to acknowledge that there are challenges that come when you date that quickly and marry that quickly. What I am grateful for is with Brett, we are both committed to striving to grow together as a couple. And that can be challenging too, because that can look different for both of us, right? We can both have different opinions. If we can get back to, okay, we both really strongly value being committed to each other and building our relationship together and being responsible to our children that we've brought into this life together. And we may have different perspectives on how to go about that. If we can remember that grounded, equal shared value of where we both want to grow together, then I think it gets easier to navigate. Okay, well, he feels like this would help improve our marriage while I feel this. Because then sometimes I think that's where the conflicts arise and where people feel like there's no hope. because there's a difference in opinion or just the way we process things rather than staying grounded in what that shared value system.
Okay.
So I feel like that's kind of been something that we've had to navigate.
Help me understand here. So I think it makes sense to most people that when it comes to gentle parenting, but when it comes to, I guess, I don't know if you would call it gentle marriage. I don't know what you call it, but like that honest self reflection in marriage, looking back on that 14 years and on your children, many kids have been in that mix, moving to another country, navigating just the differences of families, you're creating your own family culture, all of these things. What would you say to listeners about how you grew in that honest self reflection? Like, what has really helped you take that relationship to the next level?
I'm going to put a plug in here for Jennifer Finlayson Fife, which you told me you had on years
Yes.
back to
Yeah.
that one. Yeah, like honestly, I think she was one of the main influences in my life over the last several years that has kind of helped me to develop that skill because she is really about that, like looking honestly at ourselves and holding ourselves accountable. I would say probably invited me into this space. So probably if the best thing that I can offer here is to turn people to go look at her content because she has so many amazing tools and resources. Even just her podcast. That's what I started with was just her podcast that's available to everyone. And what I love about her is that in many ways she is just good old fashioned conservative and at the same time though challenges belief systems that maybe we carried with us that maybe aren't as helpful as we thought, that maybe some people think are progressive. To me, I think is just kind of leading into a more equal partnership type of marriage relationship. And so that I think that's what just prompted me into looking more into this more honest self-reflection within my marriage. And surprisingly, Kendra, I think lots of times people think, like you had mentioned, gentle parenting and transitioning into gentle marriage. For me, actually, it looked like me being more assertive because within my partnership, I would tend to, and relationships in general, like I am the classic people pleaser that is not as friendly as we like to make ourselves out to be because there is, and again, not to shame myself, but it's just this, I want people to like me so that there is not conflict, so that I am comfortable, right? So I may have looked like the less abrasive or confrontational initially in those first few years, but then after listening to Jennifer Finlayson Fife, it was kind of this invitation to be like, the honest self-reflection, Kendra, was, okay, I can't control other people, but I can control myself. And that includes using my words. That includes speaking, even when it's uncomfortable, even if I feel like they might not agree with me. But what I have control over is my own internal world. Like if my husband asks me, hey, is that okay? And I say, yeah, that's fine. But inside, I'm like, oh, that's super annoying. You know, I'm being dishonest, right? Like there's a level of deception. And I think the challenging thing is that we have made that out to be normal and acceptable. It's interesting because when I talk to people about this and I talk about how that's deceptive, lots of times people get really resistant and it triggers them because I think it's so normal, right? Like it's to misrepresent ourselves because we're uncomfortable to actually like show our internal feelings. And that doesn't mean that we owe it to everyone to say exactly what's going on inside. But I think what I am realizing is not expressing ourselves with everyone and not misrepresenting ourselves are different things, right? Like just being quiet and not saying something versus like saying something that's not accurate, that's different. That is deceptive, right? And the problem is that we then carry that with us and there's frustration that we carry and that goes over, it bleeds over into the relationship and it has an impact. And so that was something that was really humbling for me to go through was this realization that relationships really do take two to tango, it is two-sided, and what is my role in this? And how am I going to show up? How can I live with myself regardless of how Brett responds? Because that's his to own, right? But if I can show up more honestly, then that gives him more information to really actually build upon. But if I'm giving him false information, then is it really his fault when he shows up in a way that I'm not too happy with, but I haven't really expressed that, So anyway,
I appreciate, as always, that I do with you, just that vulnerability, that openness to share your story, because I think that's just so important to be able to relate to other people and feel like we're not alone. And even just you talking, I think about all my clients and myself included here. I think that is a typical story, especially in faith led communities where it is somewhat that traditional response where the woman is not as assertive, much more passive, and typically the man is more aggressive. Now, that's not always the case, but often, and letting go of that people pleaser tendency or that desire to keep the peace, to not rock the boat. I hear that all the time. And I do have males that come and do that same thing. But typically, both sides are learning to be more assertive rather than the other side of the spectrum. And that can be really hard, especially when that wasn't modeled a lot for us growing up in most cases. Like, I had no idea that I wasn't being assertive. And it took me a lot of years to figure that out. And honestly, I don't know. I'll have to double check with my husband. I think he would say yes. But for a while there, I don't even know if he really liked the assertive person I was becoming because it was so different than the person he had married. Like sometimes he would say to me, like, oh, you're a strong personality. And I just want to slap him. I'm like, that does not sound like a compliment. But yes, I am becoming stronger because that is important to me. It is important to stand up for myself and to advocate for myself. And I didn't do that as well as I thought I did earlier on. So I'm a little late in the game, but I'm showing up now.
you know what? I think that is life, right? Constantly learning. And that excites me. Sometimes I used to feel if I didn't have it figured out, if someone presented new information to me, then I was behind or I hadn't figured it out because the goal in LDS culture is perfection, right? And so we're trying to reach this standard. And what I feel like has kind of helped me to settle a little bit more is I don't think perfection is a fixed state, but rather a relational knowledge and accountability. I have the hope and dream that if we truly believe in eternal life, we will constantly be learning because how dreary and boring would eternity be if we reach perfection or just
Yeah.
living forever? Like, the idea that we're continuing to learn and grow within marriage, I think is comforting to me because I have seen different individuals in my life who are my same age, who are older than me, who have adult children, and they're still figuring out their marriage. The empty nester stage is completely different than what our relational style is going to look like as parents of young children, And so giving ourselves that space. And I say too, I doubt that it wasn't that Joel disliked you so much as he disliked you throwing off the equilibrium. Like we like things to stay, And so when he's sensing that it's you that's like throwing off the groove and he's like, I don't know what to do with this. If I can get her to stop what she's doing instead of look at myself, and if I can get her to come back to like what we know, then I'm going to do that. Right. Because I bet if you were to ask him, he would say that like, oh, that wasn't very kind of me, or I wouldn't claim that now, like,
Absolutely. And he has really been quite wonderful. And honestly, even for him, like we both, just like you're alluding to, Kenzie, like this is a life of progression, especially if we're really seeking joy and fulfillment, right? Like we are seeking to improve and that constant equilibrium that we're searching for, like you're talking about, it is so hard to attain. But I think even we might attain it for like moments, but ultimately that's a sign of growth when there is that messiness, I guess I can't for lack of a better word.
we want equilibrium, but the reality is that it's going to you get the equilibrium. And then if both of you are striving for growth, one of you is going to throw it off constantly. It's just that constant shifting and changing. And so I feel like that has been a gift within our marriage too, is growth, and it being challenging is a beautiful thing. Because I think before I had this mindset of like, if you're doing everything right, it should be easy. No, that's not
Yeah.
accurate, you know? And there is beauty in this. And I think that's something that Finley and Fife put about like, if we can embrace the messiness and look at it as a sign of growth instead of like, oh crap, we're doing something wrong, we're failing. It's so much more comforting. Like, okay, I can sit in this and tolerate it a little bit more because like the success of my marriage isn't on the line. You know what I mean?
There's this really button up family that I know, and they're incredible. And their daughter had an eating disorder pretty severely. And the other day, she just casually, with a bunch of people around, made light of it in a beautiful way. And I was just like, oh, I love how challenges and trials make us all so much more relatable and human. And we don't really want that buttoned up kind of person that's, I don't know, it's the messy, beautiful parts that come out when we're going through all those growth challenges, right?
And it makes me think no one is perfect, right? And so I think the more we get comfortable with this idea that we are growing and becoming, and that we don't have it all figured out, but other people might have information, other people will have information that can help us become the people we want to become. It makes me think of the Ruby Frankie case. It's kind of a little bit older news, but they had this whole YouTube channel and they had the appearance of this perfect put together family, and then years later, there's this realization that like it isn't what it seems to be on the surface. And so I think the reason I like to share my own personal experiences and express ways that I have not shown up the way that I want to or things like that is because it's for me, it's a practice of getting more comfortable with things that I don't necessarily love, but that are a part of my journey and that have impacts. And I want to take accountability for those impacts. And I think it's unfair, like, for example, with my husband. So I was the people pleaser, but the silent resenter. And so there was like this, it was so easy to like paint him as like the overreactive, he gets angry easier, da 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 partner. But then like I would feel frustrated. And that just created this divide in, first of all, I think his ability to trust me and me wanting to get close to him. And it had impacts. And so I want to, as painful as it is, to acknowledge it. I want to get better at that because that is where the growth is if we can get better at tolerating our own truth, our own realities, then I think the better we can get at making improvements. If we're unwilling to acknowledge those things that are uncomfortable about ourselves, I think that's what therapists and stuff call like our shadow work, right? If we can get more comfortable with that, then I think the more we'll be able to deal with those shadow pieces of ourselves that aren't really bad. It's just we haven't been given the tools yet. So I would say that applies for marriage and parenting.
Absolutely. And that's a great way to wrap it up too. But in your own words, if you would say one final tip on what you could share with listeners on how to have more honest self-reflection in just one simple way, what would you say that would be?
I think there are two tells for me. One is when I go into like being my own bully. That's one way of me, like, not really being willing to look at the truth of the situation because I exaggerate it so much that it's like, "Oh, I'm the worst wife, I'm this," like, that is a tell for me to be like, "Ugh, stop right there." Like, that's not accurate. And then on the other side is the condescending thought process. And for me, I think not again removing the shame, but just becoming aware of those, like starting to notice my thought patterns in my interactions with my husband and my children and those around me. Like when I'm going to this place, what am I avoiding seeing about myself? What am I the self-deprecating thing like that. Like, what is true about what they're telling me in their feedback that I am afraid to see? And so in some ways I shut them down because who wants to like make someone kick someone when they're already down, right? But that's not fair to them because it's not accurate, right? Like that's not what they were saying, that I'm the worst wife or whatever. What is true in that statement? And then over here, what about this situation makes me uncomfortable? Or it's I guess that would just be my invitation, is to begin to notice your own thoughts when you're avoiding taking accountability. It's not easy.
That is a great little self-check thing you can do, I think. It's almost like that less than, better than. One up, one down, and just a quick check on how we can recognize if we're being open in that space where we can do some honest self-reflection. And I think so many of the things that people talk about, whether it's the Gottmans or like EFT stuff, I'm getting into jargon here, but it comes down to the part that I love is it takes away who's to blame. It's just simply information that we can get curious about to help us make these pivots that will connect us and connect our children and all of our relationships, right? So I appreciate you bringing that to light again and reminding us that there's simple ways that we can do that. So thank you for coming on the show and sharing your insights with us today, Kenzie. It was a delight.
Thank you so much for having me, Kendra. It is always so fun and good for me to learn. So thank you.
Thank you so much for listening today. As a reminder, please head over to our website to see our 3 brand new courses. We've put so much work into them and are so excited to be able to share them with you, as well as new ones coming out this spring. Also, as a reminder, please leave a review so that we can help spread those positive ripples. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you back here soon.